It's Wake Up World, play-ins day 6. LGD Gaming and Unicorns of Love sweep the competition to qualify into the group stage. We're taking a look back at the best of play-ins and a look ahead at groups. Which teams will make it out on top?
There's the kill. GA finds 2, the bottom lane in 1 fell. Ripwalker's legacy. Surely not, surely they haven't thrown this game away. But Tapu now in a 1v3. Ashear's picked up the triple. He's gonna make it the quadra kill. GA's just popping off. Tapoon doing what he can, but Kramer is going to complete the ace as LGD are going to sweep their way to the world's main event.
Trying to get onto Gadget, uses the showstopper, pulls him back. The unstoppable onslaught from the top side of the fight as well, but you can see No Man's still alive, cleanses away, and Cacao going to be the first to fall. Second goes Snowflower, and this should be a whitewash for the Unicorns. No Man's just dodging around as much as he can. The curtain's open, and the curtain's shut right in the face of Supermassive.
Day 6 of the World Championship is in the books, and we're here to break it all down. It's Wake Up Worlds. Welcome one, welcome all to Wake Up Worlds, our daily ESPN Esports League of Legends World Championship program. Thank you so much for watching us live on Twitch, the ESPN app, on Twitter, and YouTube. Arda and Tyler with you every step of the way as we get closer and closer to crowning a 2020 League of Legends World Championship. And that's it for the play-ins, Tyler. We're done. Phase 1 is over.
Done. Oh, phase 1 is over. Play-ins are done, and that was the appetizer, Arda. That's the appetizer to the meal. That was, you got a little nice salad in, you got some appetizers, a bit of onion rings, but now we're getting to the real meat and potatoes. We're bringing the steak in now. This is where the real tournament starts and where the real action begins. Like, right when we saw the 4 groups, the A, B, C, D, fully complete, the 16 teams left for competing, vying for the Summoners Cup. Now it feels real. This feels like, no offense to the teams that have been eliminated, no offense to the 6 teams that bounced out in the play-in stage, but everyone knows that this is the main event. This is what you work towards. This is what everything you do for the entire year builds up to, is this stage of the tournament. This is where everything begins. And I cannot tell you I'm so excited. I'm so excited to dive into these groups. I'm so excited to talk about everything. This is, I would say personally, the most stacked top 6 team we've ever had. I don't think there's a bad group in the bunch. Every group looks like it's going to be competitive in some way or form. It's a good one, Arda. We're going to have a lot of fun discussing these groups because I think we got the most balanced groups possible.
We will spend a lot of time on this program discussing all the groups, and you're seeing the groups on your screen here. But what we're going to do first is we're going to tell you exactly how we got to this point, because as we did mention, the play-ins are over. And I think, at least in terms of results today, as much as I have been banging that Turkish drum all along, I think that we both can agree that the stronger teams definitely won. And on paper, at least, the right team advanced to groups. Happy trails to Supermassive. It was a lot of fun being on your bandwagon. I'm sure there's a lot of future success coming to, in particular, individuals, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later at some other time. But we got to focus right now on the 2 teams that did advance. First of all, Unicorns of Love. Tyler, speaking of banging the drum, you have been singling out this team as one to watch, and they delivered.
Let's go back to the power ranking show, Arda. Like, if you weren't here for a power ranking show, I was adamant that Unicorns of Love should be ranked higher than almost every single wildcard region team, and I thought they should be ranked above the Pacific teams. I thought Unicorns of Love are a real contender. I've banged on the drum before they even stepped foot in Shanghai that they are a real team, that they are mechanically gifted players 1 to 5, and they play a style that puts people on the back foot. They're not always clean, as they have shown, but they never let the other team breathe, and they create an atmosphere that's uncomfortable for other teams. Compare that to teams like V3, who played very timid and maybe played a bit more intelligently, but they were very easy to counter, especially when you look at the individual skill between players on V3 and people on LGD, where Unicorns of Love don't only have the mechanical individual talent, but they have a creativity to them and a confidence to them that has them a step above. And today, I think it was Supermassive, and Supermassive is an amazing team on 5-on-5 team fights. They are a team throughout the playing stage who showed us they're going to pick the Wombo combo. They're going to pick the Hecarim and the Galio and the chain ultimate stage, where when all ultimates are up, they are a team that knows how to push the go button and how to chain those ultimates correctly. They are an amazing 5-on-5 team fighting team. Unicorns of Love are a skirmishing god team. They are a team that likes to play dirty, and they like to fight often, early, late, mid. It doesn't matter. They love to fight. So when you have a team like Supermassive who wants to get into the right positions, the right state of time to have these, perfectly like turned out and like blueprinted and like penciled out team fights, versus a team that's just going to push them and make them not have that ability to lean back and just kind of pick their and choose when they want to fight. It just wasn't there for Supermassive. Like, we saw some good moments from them, and when they were able to execute those 5-on-5 team fights, we saw that they could win. But it was Unicorns of Love always pushing the tempo. When those ultimates were on cooldown for Supermassive, that's when Unicorns of Love were pushing them. When they were, they were 4-man diving bot lane, or they were fighting through the jungle, because it doesn't matter if they have no ults, all ults up. It doesn't matter if they have half health, full health, 2 items, 3 items. Unicorns of Love always believe that they can win a fight. No matter what the odds are, they are confident enough to win. And I've said this throughout the entire playing stage. I love how disrespectful they are to their opponents. Where, be it No Man's, just kind of clowning on Balulu, who is more of an enabler, more of a utility role player on Supermassive, and just crushing him in lane and kind of just playing around with him on the map. They're a team that isn't scared of anyone. And going into groups, especially the group they got drawn into, they're going to have that no fear attitude if they want to have any chance of going a bit farther.
Save the group talk for a little bit later, of course. Unicorns of Love, just to add a little bit more flavor here. Of course, you heard it on the broadcast. They're the first CIS team to make groups since 2016, and Unicorns of Love have their own redemption story. They lost to Splice in a best-of-5 last year that prevented them from qualifying to the group stage, so a little bit of redemption there. And Unicorns of Love, according to our fantasy app, were picked 87% of the time to advance. So a lot of people, the thousands that are playing in our ESPN League of Legends predictor, had a lot of faith in Unicorns of Love. And speaking of the League of Legends predictor, you can join us for free. You can invite your friends. You can create your own group. You can battle it out and compare points. I'm not doing so well. Tyler's doing pretty good. Remember, it's free to play. And it's ESPN.com/League of Legends Predictor. Or if you have the ESPN Fantasy app, just click on the trophy tab and you will see you can make picks for every single round all the way to the final. It's free every step of the way. And you can continue to pick Unicorns of Love if you want, if you believe in them, as we talk about the groups later on in the show. But to tie a bow on Unicorns of Love, here are some it's funny that you mentioned their swagger. Like, when every time you mention them and their swagger and their pompous attitude or their style of play, it reminds me of Ric Flair. Like, I just think of a Ric Flair promo, like, woo, like they're strutting on the Summoner's Rift and they're just like dropping elbows and setting up for the figure 4. Like, they have that swagger about them, and I love that.
Yeah, it's a thumb nose to the establishment, right? Where a lot of these teams play to get moral victories, where it's a hip hip hooray, I went to play-ins and I failed. Where Unicorns of Love came to not take part, but as I've said on Twitter before, they came here to take over Arda. They came here to take over, and the first step of that takeover has been they've checked it off, and now they're onto the group stage. So I will see. It's gonna be a much tougher test. I don't think No Man's is going to be able to have clown his opponents as much when we talk about what mid laners he's going to be facing in the group stage. But I am bullish on this team. I've been a fan of them since the beginning, and we'll talk about that more soon.
Interview with Sheepy, by the way, who was the coach of Unicorns of Love. Tyler was able to conduct it after that interview. It is available at ESPN.com or on our YouTube channel /ESPN Esports. Producer Tish in my ear, do we have a clip for that? Okay, so we're going to move on. You can find that full interview over at youtube.com/ESPN Esports. Let's move on over to LGD Gaming. Another sweep, another impressive one. They didn't look dominant in all 3 games, Tyler, but still the result is the same. Oh, you're yawning. What's going on there? Are you tired, bro?
Oh man, I mean, I changed my sleep schedule, but man, that game. I mean, game 2 was exciting. I will give it that for maybe all the wrong reasons, but we don't have to linger on this too much. I said this yesterday. Do you believe in miracles? Do you believe that one of the smallest regions, with I believe over 200,000 registered summoners, almost no esports infrastructure, no $1 million contracts being handed out in Oceania, versus a Titanic franchise in LGD who've been around for decades? It was really David versus Goliath, and I wanted to believe in miracles, Arda, but last night in Shanghai, there was no miracles to be had. Almost a game 2 victory that Legacy should have won. They got a bit too overeager. Should have played more safe. They were on Mountain Soul point. They were ready to get Mountain Soul. They had Baron. They could have let the Winions themselves do the work for them, get that soul, clean up a game that should have been very simplified at that point. But a team that loves to team fight, who really believed in their team fighting over everything else, that kind of got the best of them. And LGD, for all the smack I've talked about them on this show for the last week, they showed up. They were impressive. They knew what they had to do to take care of business, and game 2 aside, they took care of business. And we now go into a group, like I said, with your Cruise of Love. The competition gets much more high, and it's a lot better of competition. But I think LGD getting these lumps is a good thing. If LGD came into groups and didn't have this playing experience, and they played like they did at the beginning of the group stage or the beginning of play-ins, they would have gone 0-6 and been embarrassed. They would have fallen out completely. But I think coming in, learning the meta, learning what's going on, kind of feeling out the competition, and then finally turning it on with 7 straight victories going into the group stage. I'm not saying they're going to get into the quarterfinals, but they're not a pushover. This team is not a pushover. There's too many good players on the team. I still think their bottom lane, especially Kramer, a bit of a question mark. I don't know how he's going to fare in the upcoming group, but that's another discussion we had. So congrats LGD and Legacy. Good try. Very proud of Oceania. This was the best they've ever done. Mm-hmm. Maybe next year, I think. Hopefully, unless, there's a very good chance that this team just gets ransacked in the offseason and we see 4 or 5 of these players on, LCS Academy. So or all of them on 100 Thieves. Somehow Papa Smithy gets around the only 2 players from outside of NA. He just brings an all-Australian super team together. Yeah, I mean, they're very good players, especially Rays. Rays showed that he could stand up to Kramer. He was beating Kramer in the laning phase, and he was putting a lot of pressure. And in those team fights, he was excellent. Outside of game 3, where he kind of missed the mark, but I can't really blame him too much. It was 0-2. He's a young player, but Oceania, respectable finish. They were not the embarrassment of the tournament as they have been in previous iterations. And hopefully this, kickstarts maybe Oceania League of Legends a bit more sponsorship, a little bit more infrastructure, more payment into these guys' hands, so they don't either have to retire or they have to go to North America. So Oceania is a tough place to play League of Legends, but they did all their countrymen and countrywomen proud.
Who's your player of the day?
Oh, this is really simple. It's GA from LGD, and again, another player that I've been a bit harsh on, the old Bjergsen versus GA debate that has waged on since our top 20 ranking show, where I was staunch on Team Bjergsen. I said Bjergsen's better than GA, and I would stand on that hill. GA, for the first few days of the tournament, proved that I was right. I retroactively put Bjergsen into our top 20 on Twitter. And now we're going to see it. We're going to see GA versus Bjergsen in Group C coming up. So we're actually going to be able to decide this debate. We're going to actually get to see these 2 players play twice. But today he was just excellent. Tally is a good team fighting player, but in lane he had nothing for GA. GA just controlled the mid lane, and they really couldn't do anything about it. No Man's as well in the Unicorn series also deserves a tip of the hat. Again, another amazing performance by a player who ended the playing stage of a DPM of over 700, leading everyone. I guess that's what happens when you are allowed to farm on Kassadin. But GA, excellent end to the tournament, out into the play-in stage, and I think he's ready to go. I think Group C with LGD, Gen G, Fnatic, and TSM, that's a blockbuster group right there. There's no bad matchup in that group.
You keep previewing the groups and just like shallow topic conversations. We're gonna get there, I promise. We're gonna get there. We will do a deep dive into each and every group because now they are all decided. Before we get there, though, why don't we give a little bit of a best of the play-ins? Let's pick 3 categories, and we will give, or maybe more, and we will give our best from the play-ins. So Tyler, if I say best match, what would you say was the best match of the play-ins?
So I don't think there was any technical like masterpieces. There was no Rocks versus SKT to be had here. But what we did have is a lot of entertaining bangers. We had a lot of entertaining slugfest. We had a lot of games where it was back and forth action from the get-go, where 2 teams stood in the middle of the octagon and just swung at each other's faces, seeing which one would get knocked out. And my favorite of the bunch was Unicorns of Love versus LGD game, where this game should not have gone how it should have gone. Unicorns of Love, for the lack of a better word, inted a lot in the early game. They played, as they do, disrespectfully. Lazy backs and teleports, very lackadaisical play around the jungle. They greeted for a lot of they were greeting for minions, like really disrespectful play that they got slapped on. Like LGD, even in their worst form, they're still veteran players who are mechanically gifted at the end of the day. Like you're not gonna get to just clown on GA like you do some of the weaker mid laners, no mans. But as Unicorns of Love often do, they fell behind, but they kept fighting. They kept working. They kept pushing. They didn't fall back to the status quo. They could have easily, bled out, and we saw that today with Legacy, where Legacy versus LGD, they were a team that was very, very scared at times to actually fight, and they bled out in game 1, and in game 2, it was going the same way as well, where Unicorns of Love don't bleed out. They won't just wait on the sidelines and die. If they're gonna die, they're gonna die trying to punch you and knife you in the face, and that is the Unicorns of Love way, and that's how it did in the LGD game, where they were bleeding and bloody. They had some, their guts were pouring out of their chests, but they were still punching LGD as they went down. And by the luck of it, they got the advantages. LGD had some slip-ups, and UOL's overall mechanical ability, alongside Gadgets' Twitch, outplayed LGD and won the game when they had no business doing it in the first place. And that's just what shows the danger, how dangerous Unicorns of Love are, where you can make them bleed and you can take down their blood and they can be dying of blood loss, but they are not going down without a fight, and they're going to make it very uncomfortable to do so.
The Unicorns, of Love.
The swagger. The swagger.
Yeah, that's right. Mine, I actually did this wrong, so I apologize to my producers and to you, Tyler. I picked a series. I misread this. So I picked Mad Lions versus Supermassive as an entire series. Yeah, there's a little bias in there, Turkey winning and everything. But honestly, this was a big moment for a minor region, and I think that's more generally why I picked this. It wasn't the most technically sound matchup. There were definitely matches that were 80-90% won at the draft. In particular, the games that Supermassive lost, Mad Lions just completely outdrafted them. But this was the game where people really said, you know what? Kakao is showing us how to play Lilia. Definitely, we didn't see that be the case today. But we saw it during Mad Lions, and so if there was one series where he shined and Armut shined, and definitely people took notice of their potential in terms of gameplay, it was definitely here. We already knew that about them in spurts in the past. Of course, Kakao is a storied history, but especially Armut. So, I think he leveled up this tournament. I mean, he's been around for a while. He's no secret necessarily to teams, but I really feel like he leveled up after this tournament. Like, people might seriously be having conversations with him about switching regions if that's possible for their teams.
They should. Armut's an excellent player. Again, today, the team just wasn't good enough. Snowflower in particular had a very off day, some very bizarre engages by him. But Armut is a player like Bwipo, where I think how Bwipo went from the Turkish leagues over to the LEC, I think if you take Armut and you take him to the LEC, don't go to the LCS. Go to the LEC, Armut. Go to the LEC. I think you could be a very, very scary top laner. You're already a scary top laner, but if you go to a bigger team, a better team possibly with more infrastructure and to really focus on, I think you could be a world-class player, a player that we see in the group stages next year.
Well, as much praise as we're giving to Armut here, neither of us picked him as our best player of the play-ins. Who did you pick?
People are gonna call me biased here, but I picked Jensen. I picked Team Liquid Jensen. I think No Man's GA by the end. There was a lot of good players. Kai Wing, I think Kai Wing deserves a special shout out. He was his recon was beautiful throughout. But Jensen for me, it was the opposite of No Man's a bit, where Jensen just kind of came in and smashed everyone. He was just smurfing. He smashed Tally harder than GA did, but he wasn't really, clowning him. There was one point where he did do a greedy back under turret to get a turret plate, which results in his death. But on Twitter, he did clarify that he basically was like, I'm going to die, but I need this turret plate money to buy an item, so I'm okay dying. So overall, though, Jensen just smurfed the entire playing stage. And I said this yesterday, and I've said this quite often. He's a 9 out of 10 player. He is, pro wrestling, Arda. He's like Daniel Bryan. He's a B+ player, you could say. You could say, people on Reddit he's a B+ player, where against, play-in players, against very good players, Jensen can beat them. Like we saw that at Freak of Freaks a few years ago, where he stomped the mid lane versus Kuro, and he got the team to the semifinals. But then when they actually played Fnatic and Caps, he kind of got styled on. When he plays that world-class 10 out of 10 player who can play at the highest level, he gets outshined. And I think we saw the brilliance of Jensen in the playing stage, where he's playing against players he knows he's going to smash. Now he goes to the group stage. And I think Jensen's goal is by the end of this tournament, he wants to be a 10 out of 10 player. He wants to prove he's an A+ player. And the only way he can do that, though, is to get far in this tournament. And he has a lot of mid laners. And he has a date with, one of his old friends, Mr. Caps, in the group stage. So if he wants to prove early on, if he wants to get that B+ player tag ripped from his name and really get that world-class player, 10 out of 10, A+ star, you have to, he has 2 chances against Caps in the group stage. And those are going to be very interesting games. And I'm sure all our audience and all the Western audience is salivating over some more Team Liquid versus G2 drama.
I think that Team Liquid fans watching, and even you, Tyler, will salivate at this story here. So you mentioned B+ player and Daniel Bryan. Might very well be appropriate to what could happen with Team Liquid. Let me just turn the clock back for a second. Why was Daniel Bryan called a B+ player? This was a storyline leading to WrestleMania. Triple H, the authority, the big boss of WWE, said, you are a B+ player, you will never become champion. And that eventually led to WrestleMania and Daniel Bryan winning the World Championship. So now, project that onto Jensen and Team Liquid. So there you go. If you want something to hang your hat on, TL fans, if Jensen is definite, if Jensen is Daniel Bryan, then this might be the year you win Worlds.
Pro wrestling is scripted, so no, I don't want to break the illusion.
So is esports. We all see the script.
Oh yeah. If
anyway,
it's scripted, then
my best player. I could have picked any of the PSG talent players, like you said. Kai Wing was a great choice. I have a soft spot for the substitutes, especially the AHQ players, and D as well, who's a coach of another team in Worlds. I just picked Uniboy because his stats were impressive, to be honest with you. But I just love that story that they helped this team make groups and they can't reap their rewards. So if PSG have a long run, they really did it off the backs of players that were subbing in this surreal circumstance that was due to the pandemic. And you look at Uniboy and his statistics, and he had a KDA of 24. He's playing out of his mind. Every player really was. But they hadn't played much together before Worlds, and that makes it even more surreal of a story. So Uniboy is really the conduit to a shout out to many other players that could have been deserving based on this story. So that's why I picked Uniboy.
Yeah, it's actually really sad we're not going to see the super PSG talent team, because with how aggressive they are around Uniboy and Kongwei, and how kind of they quicken the pace of a pretty methodical, slower team in PSG with the 2 star players in jungle. They really would have needed that in the group they're going to. They really could have used Uniboy and Kongwei where they got drawn into. So. Yeah. Sad, I mean, great story, but a bittersweet end.
Speaking of great story, I'll just start with my biggest surprise. PSG, I think that is no surprise that they are the biggest surprise, and we already outlined exactly why. I hope their success continues. I think that the Cinderella story is one that we can all gravitate to, so let's see what happens for them in groups. What's your biggest surprise?
It's similar storyline. It's Legacy Esports of Oceania. I talked a little bit about it today, where one of the smallest regions, not a lot of money infused into it. Lots of turnover year by year. Most of their top players like King, Triple, Fudge, Destiny have all been imported out into North American Academy systems. Rioma into the 100 Thieves system. Like they're a farming league, and it seems like it could be the case again, where I think Raze is a player that I think a lot of, English-speaking dominated teams should look at and be like, this player is really special. There's a lot of interesting players on the team. Bob Biff, especially, who is one of the only remaining member of the Mammoth team that got torn apart by those import signing. So for me, Legacy was the most surprising. I had them as the second weakest team coming into the World Championship. V3 Esports was my last pick. That actually turned out to be correct. But Legacy impressed me. They were everything I thought they would be. I thought they were weaker individually than a lot of teams outside of Raze and Tapoon. And what they did to kind of counteract that is that they didn't shy away from the weaknesses. They knew what they were weak at. They knew that Tally, who is a top laner turned mid laner, wasn't going to be able to stand in mid lane versus the likes of Jensen and GA and Humanoid or No Man's. There's better mechanical individual players in the mid lane. So what they did is they concocted these strategies that were pure team fight, where they would lose the early game to get these 5-on-5 team fights around the Rift Herald, around Dragon, around Baron, the NA RAM of 5v5, and find these combinations to be better than the individual parts they are. And it worked. It worked for a lot of the tournament. They got 3 wins in the group stage. They were so close to actually making it to the main event. They almost stole a spot into the main event where they used the style of covering up their weaknesses, and I applaud them for that. They don't have the individual talent to match up with the Team Liquid and the LGDs. I mean, Team Liquid has Core JJ. Like they are a team with $1 million player on it. 2 countless players. I am sure that the Impact contract where he's paid over $1 million is probably more than the entire Legacy salary budget put together. So for me, Legacy's story was one of they knew their weaknesses coming in. They worked the best they could. They squeezed every bit of juice they could out of it, and they got so close to making a miracle happen. So nothing but respect for the Legacy boys. They gave it everything out there, and for me, they're my pleasant surprise of the play.
Cheers to them. Good vibes.
Cheers.
To Os.
To the boys.
Mm-hmm. To tie a bow on the play-ins, Tyler, as we will soon shift our attention to groups and do a deep dive on each of the 4 groups at the 2020 League of Legends World Championship. I'd love to get your thoughts because we all know you've been covering League of Legends for a very long time. You've seen every single play-in at Worlds. You've seen every single qualification and however the process has changed at Worlds. For me, as somebody who's really diving into this for the first time, Tyler, this has been extremely exciting. We've had a lot of storylines. We've had a lot of upsets. We've had a lot of drama, and we haven't even gotten to groups yet. So I was curious about where you would rank these play-ins in terms of the most exciting or the best or the most intriguing. Where do you rank these play-ins in 2020 in those categories?
It is the best play-ins I think we've ever had. I think that's actually a tough question. I think in terms of competition and pure competition of skill level, this is the best play-ins we've ever had. I think 2018's Worlds, which I was there in South Korea, where C9 almost got bopped out in the qualifiers versus Gambit. Even last year when we had Splice versus Unicorns of Love. I think this year we had a lot of stomps in the end. I think the group stage of this play-ins was amazing. It was so much fun. I think the Supermassive Mad Lions game will be that's a match we're going to remember for a long time. I'll give it to this one. I'll give it to 2020. I think this play-ins really showed us that the gap really isn't there when you're comparing the third or fourth seed teams of region, from North America, China, or Europe to the champions of Russia. I think Unicorns of Love are good enough to beat almost every team at Worlds in a single game. I think the gap there, as I've said before, is the top 3 or 4 teams are just up. There's a bit of a level gap between those and the rest. But this was an amazing play-ins, and it's really hyped us up for the group stage that we're about to get into, because Unicorns of Love looked dangerous. Team Liquid looked, businesslike and clean. LGD are on a redemption tour where they're just reeling off win after win after win. And then we have PSG Talent, who are the complete and utter unknown. We saw the Super PSG team come in and do damage in the play-ins, and now they are an entirely different team with entirely different style of tank and river in the lineup, going to the group of death. So have fun, PSG Talent, but this was a great group stage, great play-in stage. And I think if this is how future play-in stages are going to go, and how Oceania and Latin America and Brazil hopefully, level up as, Turkey and CIS did, I think the play-in stages only get more and more interesting as the years go along.
So we will now speak about the group stage, as we have now completely sorted it all out as the play-ins have concluded. Don't forget that there will be 2 days off at the League of Legends World Championships, and play will resume on Saturday. And actually, Group D will be the one that begins things. The very first matchup of groups, which will begin at 4 a.m. Eastern on Saturday, October 3rd, is FlyQuest taking on Top Esports. We're going to talk about Group D a little bit later on. We're going to go in sequential order, but let's first show you the groups entirely as they stand right now, and I'll read them to you right now as we show you on screen as well. Group A, we got G2 Esports, Machi, Suning, and Team Liquid. Group B, Damwon, JD Gaming, PSG, and Rogue. Group C, Fnatic, Gen G, LGD, and TSM. And Group D, DRX, FlyQuest, Top Esports, and Unicorns of Love. I could hear you, Tyler. I'm in New York. I could hear you all the way from Los Angeles when it was determined that Team Liquid would get into Group A. I heard a loud yell. It was a 7.4 on the Richter scale. I was like, what is that? Why am I shaking? Why are the lampshades just like rocking back and forth? Oh, it's Tyler elated that TL is in Group A.
Oh, it was a good moment. When I saw that PSG ball come out, when they picked that PSG ball, it felt there was just this elation inside of me. There was a moment of just pure bliss. Now we talk about Group A, and Group A, here we go. It's the group I wanted for Team Liquid, but it's not an easy group. It's not an easy group in there's nothing easy about Group A. I got happy because it's not Group B, but this is a tougher group than I think some fans might think. I think LGD, how LGD performed in play-ins might affect how people see Suning. And I think the thing people don't realize is that Suning kind of just destroyed LGD in the 2 times they recently played in best of 5s. They're 6-0 against LGD in the playoffs and the regionals. And it's a tough squad. Suning is really, really good. And they have the, you know me, Arda. I love talking about how I love the veteran leadership and the experience combined with the young talent. When you combine those 2 elements, I love it. I think that's the recipe for success in League of Legends, where you have some rookies and some, first-year, second-year players with high mechanical talent, and then you have some really, really gritty veterans who can just lead the pack. And Suning has all the elements that I love from those kind of teams.
Okay, so G2, Machi, Suning, Team Liquid. Obviously, people are going to look at Machi and say, well, they're 4th. A lot of people are going to make that initial assumption. On paper, they're going to slot Machi at the bottom, and they're going to slot G2 at the top. I'm not saying that we are doing that. I'm saying a lot of people will look at Group A and say, that's probably where these teams will end up, and then Team Liquid and Suning will be fighting for 2nd and 3rd. On your initial glance, how much does a team like Machi, how much of a chance does a team like Machi have in this group?
Are they allowed to have Uniboy and Kongwei subbing for them? No, that's kind of mean to Mission. Mission, their mid laner is actually really good. He's one of the better players in the PS. I do think they come in as the fourth place team, as usually does with the LMS. The LMS has had a kind of rough road, and then they kind of folded into the PCS, and Machi does play a more of a slower style, not fast paced. They don't play anything too crazy. They're pretty standard for what I've seen of them. Full admission, I've only seen a few of their playoff games, a few of their playoff series. I didn't watch them in the regular season, but it's not going to be a tough. Like we looked over PSG talent of subs, and they surprised us all. I'm not going to overlook Machi. Mm-hmm. It's a very similar situation to General, where we've had a lot of these teams and groups where you have the LMS team that's not named Flash Wolves, and they go 0-6 or 1-5, but they're a tough out. And I think Machi is the weakest team in the top 16. I'll say that right now. I think from what I've seen, and I said this before group stages, you can sign off on this, Arda, because you were there. Okay. I said Unicorns of Love were better than Machi. I said Unicorns of Love are a top 16 team.
You did say that, yes. You did say that.
So going into groups, I am going to stand behind my statement, and I'm going to say Machi is the fourth seed of this group. But there's no easy outs anymore at Worlds. I don't think this is an easy out by any means. But I'm going to slot them in number 4.
Okay. I want to focus on Team Liquid, and I want to ask you this question in this fashion. Obviously, the meme at Worlds for Team Liquid is they can't get out of groups. They were 3-3 the last 2 years. Yes, the roster has changed. We'll get to that in a second. But the core, pardon the pun, is still there, okay? They still have 3 of the 5 players. No more Xmithy, no more Double Lift. Totally understand that, okay? However, they do... I want to compare for me, Tyler. I'm going to read you the groups from the last 3 years and compare me the groups for Team Liquid and their chances based off of the difficulty of the groups of the last 2 years. So 2019, they had Damwon, Invictus Gaming, and AHQ. They went 3-3. In 2018, they had KT Rolster, Edward Gaming, and Mad Team. They also went 3-3. This year, they have G2, Machi, and Suning. How does that compare?
It's very similar to the 2018. Very, very similar to the 2018 group they had, where G2 would be KT of proven stars, a lot of proven stars. Korea, top Korean team, top European team in G2. Edward Gaming, very good Chinese team. Not as young and with a more rookie base on Suning, but I would say they were equally looked at as like possible quarterfinal contenders. Get to quarterfinals. Semifinals would be, amazing for either EGG of 2018 or Suning of 2020. And then you have Team Liquid. And I think this Team Liquid is better than the 2018 edition. Maybe the results haven't been as good, but I do think they have a lot more potential. Last year I gave Team Liquid probably like a 20% chance of getting out of groups. 2018, I was more bullish on them. I thought they were better than EGG. I think I actually had them out of that group. I was probably like 50%, like 50-50, 55% on them. And I think this year, that you're going to say this is a cop-out answer. You're going to say, I'm seeing like a 3-3 record. I'm picturing a 3-3 record again, even without double lift.
Again?
This feels like a 3-3 group for Liquid. This feels like a tiebreaker group. I feel this is a tiebreaker. And I'm not saying it's versus Suning. I think Suning's deceptively good. I think a lot of people are putting too many eggs in the G2 basket. I know Wonder tweeted out, is there any good groups or any good teams in this group? But I don't think G2 is as dominant as they were last year, as results have shown. And I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for them in this group. I don't think it's going to be a 6-0. I don't think G2 is getting out of this group 6-0. I think Machi probably steals the game as well. I don't think they go 0-6 either. Where I think I've seen a lot of people saying, G2 out easy, Machi out last. But I really do think this Team Liquid team very much feels like a 3-3, go to a tiebreaker, maybe a 4-2 if things get, if stars align. But for me, for Team Liquid, it's all about Broxa. Broxa is the player that I need to see shine in this group.
Do you see a world where Suning and Team Liquid get out of Group A?
Yes, definitely.
That is a strong possibility?
Yes. I have G2 advancing, just so the European fans don't kill me. Like, I have G2 as first place. I have them going out first place, but this G2 team isn't unstoppable. Like, this isn't the G2 team of last year. Do they have the potential and the ceiling to get back to that spot? Yes, of course, but Jankos isn't the Jankos of 2019 just yet. Perks and Mickey X are nowhere near the form they were in last year, even with Mickey X's injury. Caps is Caps. Caps is an ace. He is going to be that Caps level, but you always have those craps games come in. You always have those troll games of G2, and in a best of one or this single game series, it's not like there's a possibility where they just throw game to Machi. They don't feel like an unbeatable team to me, like top esports or Damn One, where I feel like those teams versus weaker teams are going to stomp them. Where G2, they play with their food a lot. There was that game last year at Worlds versus C9 where Blabber out-juggled Jankos, and it just became a all-out skirmish, like a 20-minute fight, just never-ending fight. G2 won that because they were better than Cloud9 that year and just mechanically better, and they could play with their food. And in the mid-game, they surged through, but it's a different game. And G2 definitely has a possibility of somehow falling out. It's not a shoo-in. This is not going to be a cakewalk for anyone.
Mm-hmm.